We're recording. Yes, yes, yes. I keep forgetting. Okay, so so I wanted to give you that picture because we're gonna touch all these different ideas, and you're gonna try to hold on to the framework you have of time, and it's not gonna make sense. So I'm gonna say to you, forget what you know of time, and look at it as, you know, you're going into a kind of animal kingdom or nature kingdom, and you're going to see all these different elements that you're going to have to play with. So that's the best way to look at it. And when they start the chapter, they talk about two types of ideas of time. One is known in the esoteric traditions, and one is something they've discovered, which is the second part of the book, which talks about the time vegetation. So that's new, and I believe that Damoner maybe is the first to have elaborated this piece. But the first part is something that has been part of the esoteric traditions. So I think if different schools might have different takes on it, but it's all concepts that are not new to them. It's just information they've gathered from, they use also. And so the way that they structure it is, so the first part is the more known traditions of what happens in time, and the second part is more their own discoveries with the work they've been able to do on the plane of time. And I think they use a lot of those selfic technologies. They do a lot of astral travel. So when they are in other dimensions and they're able to access other planes of reality, they can see other structures that are not so visible to us. So that's how that information, it's not just somebody doing, you know, and getting downloads. I think they do something very practical to get this information. So in the first part of the esoteric traditions, we have the time, they divided it in three sections: the time packets, the time branches, and the geography of time. We didn't talk about the geography last time. No. So we're gonna delve into that. And then we have the new theories of time vegetation. That's the end of the chapter. So this information is just to give you new language so that we can work with time in a different way. It's not this one event after another concept, but it's more of a territory where we have different elements that we need to familiarize ourselves with. So we have this language, because as we go deeper into the magical operation of time travel, then we have the framework of how they do this thing with the new language we have. Okay. Now, so the first thing that they talk about is the time packets. So what they say that we have time packets are about 66 years. They last about 66 years, and they hold a certain amount of information, of experience, of history, and these time packets are usually in 66-year pieces. They can be less or more, depends on these four variables that play inside the time packet. And we talked the rhythm, which is what kind of, if you want, musical tempo is in this time packet. They talk about the 60s versus the 80s, like, you know, the way things move. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it more as, you know, peace, love, and happiness? Or is it more go, 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 you know, materialism and all of that? So what rhythm is one of the elements of these time packets that last about 66 years. There's a capacity. Capacity is very technical because it's about saturated events. That means remember when we talked about the 8 laws that contain the experience, that contain this game of life that we are playing? Everything has to fit into these 8 laws. One of those laws is called a fall of neutral events. This constant raindrop of possibility of action and that can happen. And the saturated events are when those droplets actually touch something. a human, a plant, a dog, they become saturated because they become part of that game, that roll of cards that's being played out. And then the ones that just drop to the floor are called unsaturated. They just sit there. We will see how important they are in other operations, but capacity has got to do with how many saturated events that time packet is able to hold. And it can only hold a certain amount. So if it reaches that amount, it can shorten. The time packet can shorten. So it's not just, oh, something is happening. It's very mathematical. There's a lot of geometry. There's a lot of mathematics. The book doesn't go into that, but there's a lot of that going on here. And physicists like Nassim are fun to listen to because they try to understand all the little mechanisms in a mathematical equations. We don't have them here, thank God. Otherwise, I would not be able to do this. So in this time packet, you have this rhythm, which is like this tempo of activity. You have this capacity, which is this relationship between events that are able to be held in these time packets. Level of complexity, how well we're doing and evolving and getting more and more complex. And then the time packets are captured between divine attention, when these divine forces that work with humankind open their eyes. You know, usually when they are blinking, the eyes are closed, but when they open their eyes, they create a much more potent time, usually lasts about 3 to 4 years. And that's what divides the time packets into their time packets. So that's just summary of the time packets. And then we had the time branches. And the time branches are, you know, you have to look at time as, you know, big branches, like a tree that there's always a main event, that's a main trunk that's going on. But along this main trunk, other branches are sprouting, and sometimes they get the same level of density as the main branch, complexity, and then they can become parallel universes, or sometimes they're just little, you know, little branches that just, you know, are another opportunity for some events, but the main one stays constant. So time branches explains this dynamic a little bit, and Elizabeth had some questions on that, so we can touch on those. So in the time branches, you have the main branch, then you can have these secondary branches that branch off. Then if a secondary branch gets as thick as the main branch, then you have parallel universes that can be created. And always on these time branches, these elements that we talked about above, complexity, mass and energy, like there is also, it's not at random. There is an organized equation that allows for these things to either separate into parallel universes or just to be a separate timeline. You know, it's all about complexity and mass and energy, but it's not so important, just the idea. Have you guys, give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. Okay, so now we can go to the questions before we go further. We can have some fun with the questions, or Elizabeth, if you want me to answer your 2 questions that you had. Okay, are you okay with that? Do you want me to? Elizabeth sent me 2 questions and I wanted to answer them here. So remember when we talked about time branches? We can read that again. We can live on multiple time branches. Our awareness can be on multiple time branches at the same time. We're very capable of doing that. Do you guys remember that? Yep. Okay. We can review it, but you're okay? We can continue?
One.
Yeah, okay. So Elizabeth's question was, we are all present on multiple timelines as we have many doubles. Okay. Does this happen as soon as we are born? Yes. If we can do this, it is really a natural ability of ours to be present on these other timelines. what I asked for clarification on this is these other timelines are not the big main branches, okay? They're more, you remember that when we were talking that every second we have 6 possibilities that we can choose from. And then once we choose, everything else collapses. It's more of that idea that we have personal, these miniature branches that are our own timelines. So we could be just born here, but maybe on another timeline just above where our double is, we're getting ready to be born. And maybe in another timeline that just belongs personally to us, we might be already a year old. So our consciousness is capable of managing all of this capacity. And we are more conscious of one, but when we are in the other one, we're conscious there. So we have this capacity, and it is second nature to us. We all do it, and we're really good. And it makes me wonder if people with schizophrenia, if they are, yeah, I wonder if a lot of mental illness is people that are, maybe, they don't have, something is missing that they can't separate. But so interesting. So yes, we can do that from birth. And then the other question is, do all our doubles come together at any one time? And should I assume when we die? Yes, when we die. And it's not like, because you make you're looking at it as though you're actually living simultaneously in those. Yes, okay, yeah, no, you can definitely see it in that way. Yes, and when it collapses, it collapses. When we die in this one, all of that is also gone. So yes. Any other questions around that? Do you guys want me to reread that a little bit? Yeah, go ahead, Chacha.
Yeah, I just have a kind of a comment, because I know when I've worked with my friend Luma, she does the Akashic field, Lena, like you, but I know, and she works kind of different, but she'll kind of say to me, it's just kind of a bit of a question and maybe a comment, but she'll say, when she looks at you, she can see all the timelines. So I'm seeing it like branches. Yeah. And it's like, oh, we could go down that little branch and clean that up. And I'm wondering if we go down so far and we kind of hit a dead end, or we decide not to do it, then that timeline collapses and we get reabsorbed back into the main branch, perhaps. But there's a little bit of debris sitting out, and I don't know.
Okay, that's a good. Yes, and we're going to see it as we do the exercise of this homework that we did, this Q&A. But you are correct to say that it will get absorbed. If that timeline ends, it just ends, or it can get absorbed by the other branch, time branch, and it's going to be able to absorb it because it's got more complexity, it's got more capacity, so it will taint the other branch, so it collapses into it. Right. Okay. That's why when Falco, the Damanurians are working so hard with this new branch that Falco came to do, and he didn't create a new timeline, he created a whole new branch, right? So we've got the old one down below, and it's quite long. And it's very important that we create this new time branch, that we keep it going with higher density and higher complexity, because otherwise we can get reabsorbed back in to the old branch. And what we want to do is keep evolving and creating more and more complexity into this new time branch, so we can absorb it, and it gets tainted by it gets painted with the coloring of our new evolution. So that's why right now this is a very precarious point in time for us to continue to do our work, do this kind of gathering, to bring higher and higher level of understanding and discussions into the collective. It's important. It feeds the information here for all those little attractors going up and forth, back and up and down that we've gotten to know. So, so yes, Chacha, that's what she would be seeing. Yeah. So now we can have some fun with the. Did you guys have this one? It was just a great little review. So what I did is I made this little drawing of all these little squibbly lines. And I just wanted us to put on this diagram the different terminology that we've played with, so we get a little bit more familiar with them. But I can see that some of you don't have them, but that's okay. We'll play along with it. So, so the first one is the letter A, which is at the top of these. And what I was trying to draw for you here were time packets. So this is one whole time packet with all the branches and stuff. And so the letter up there would be time packets, which I hope I put it in there. Yes, time packets. Yes. Yay, happy days. And so the time packets are what I tried to identify. Is this helpful with you guys, or am I just having fun with it?
Keep going.
Keep going, okay. Then you have in between the time packets, it's the divine attention, okay? When you have the divinities that are opening their eyes, and whatever happened in that 3 to 4 year time period gets tainted by the perception of the divinity that's observing. So everything that you see collapses onto one branch of time. And then you have another time packet that opens. It's about 66 years. And in this one, I have a few other diagrams. I have one at the top that is a branch that just stops. It stops short. What happens when a branch stops short, also to answer to Chacha, is the level of complexity on that branch is not strong enough to maintain it. So there is a loss of consciousness or a loss of evolution. So that will cut and stop that branch from growing. So it needs to continue. In order to grow, it needs to continuously move to some level of evolution, or complexity is the word that's used. Okay? So I wanted to draw it so that we have a visual of that and what it means. It means that we have stopped creating enough complexity on that time branch to hold it and continue to grow it. So it's dropped in evolution. And then we have at the bottom, you have the main branch, and then you have all these other little branches that come, are grown from it. And we call these all secondary branches. And a secondary branch is it starts off with all these different time trials. So they're all exploratory at the beginning. Those that can get a higher level of or similar level of complexity than the main branch will either absorb the main branch, or they will just create a parallel universe. So that's how parallel universes are created. Okay, that's clear. That's clear with a little bit of visual. So I wanted that one to be there. And then at the bottom is just the 4 elements that I introduced to you, that we reviewed, that are part of the time packets. The rhythm, the level of complexity, capacity, and divine attention. So those would go at the bottom there. And I think that's it. I just wanted to give you a visual so that they become more familiar, the terms for you. Everybody's good? Any questions? No, no, all good. Okay, very nice. So now, so we talked about the time packets, we reviewed the time branches with this little diagram, and then the next element is the geography of the kingdom of time. And I think I'm going to read a little bit from the book, because I find I think it's well written. And I might not read, I'm not going to read all of it, but I just to set it up, I think it would be useful. Okay. Okay, so the geography of time. So as we explore the various, and this is on page 82 for those of you that want to follow along with the book, page 82. Eva, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Okay. As we explore the various characteristics we come across while examining the territory of time, we can truly begin to speak of a geography of time that describes the territory, the physiology of this territory. We can compare the human perception of time's flow to a river passing through different territories, time packets as an example. Its course then often divides into a number of small streams like time branches, which sometimes loop back to rejoin the main river, points of divine attention, or if not, then give origin to new rivers, parallel worlds. As this river develops, we can also encounter other phenomena that can alter the course of time flow, creating points in which time takes on a singular characteristics, which brings us to time loops, vortices, area of slow flow near the banks of the time river, and fast flow areas at the middle. We can also find areas where the river is actually discontinuous, these areas being disconnected from the rest of the river, or where the river itself no longer has a continuous flow, but it breaks off into blocks. So that just to give you the visual. So think about this big river, and you have these different things that are happening in the river. And one of the first, now I gave you notes for this, and we could go through the notes. Okay. So in this river, we find something called the time loops. And I want to read something about the time loops because I think it's important. So we have a river, and in this river, we're going to have a bunch of elements. We're going to have time loops, and in these time loops are time castles. We're going to talk about those two. Then we have time whirlpools or vortices. Then we have fast and slow moving water. We have still water. We have rivers that stop. And then we have these time islands. And then we have time weight, which is the last piece we're going to talk about. So in this river, there's there's 6 elements. We're all okay? Duncan, it's good, okay. Okay, so the first element we're going to talk about is time loops, and I might even take it to the time castle because it combines together. So this is on page 84. Do you guys want to read, or you're okay with me reading?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So time loops. Time loops are formed. Let me show you this picture in the book if you guys don't have it. So you here. Okay, these are the time loops with the castles on top. So it's on page 84. So time loops are formed in areas where a part of the river of time, though still connected to the rest, assumes a very different speed and direction. In doing so, also assumes characteristics that allow events to be preserved. In a certain sense, it is as if a bubble is formed in which time almost comes to a standstill. In an area that is isolated from the rest of the river. So this means that the events inside the bubble that still need to be saturated remain in a state for a much longer period compared to those in the normal flow of time. This natural condition can be used by means of magic technologies to build particular structures called time castles, whose function is to preserve events that can be used exclusively by time travelers. So here we start to set the foundation for the more complex things we're going to learn about later. So a time loop, think of a river. You know, sometimes you have where the river is flowing, but you have a little inlet and the water is stagnant. It's exactly the same kind of thing. And this is a great opportunity to create these technologies for time travel, because there is unsaturated events in this river of time that if you know what you're doing, you can use them to have an impact on the events that are happening. So to benefit, evolution, if you want. Hopefully you're a good magician. So those are the time loops. So that's one of the aspects. Then time vortices or whirlpools. I'm not going to, I can read this one, but it's pretty, so time vortices or whirlpools are areas of time where events assume a direction that makes them repeat certain conditions cyclically, or in which sequence of events that are very similar to each other present themselves within a very short period of time. So it's just to give a practical example, the second half of the 20th century was distinguished by a condition in which very similar events occurred every 5 to 6 years. So maybe in time we can have this observation. So these are just elements that time can do that are important just to have in the back of our mind. Now, time islands are a little bit more problematic for the kingdom of time. So let me just, I think I'm going to read some of it because it also talks about us. I think it's important to read this one. It's got some good information. So time islands are areas of time that are disconnected from the rest of the time structure because of breaks or interruption in the timeline. In practice, this means that the relationship of cause and effect that normally distinguishes events distributed along the timeline is interrupted. So if we go to my notes, my understanding of timelines is and they talk about it here. So it means that there was a break, something happened. Usually there has to be a large amount of matter that is moved in order to create a break in the fabric of time. So a catastrophe. And then you have a break in the plane of time and you get these islands. And these islands then create a problem for a few reasons, because now they're not connected directly to the plane of time. It's like a hole in a sweater. Think of time as this river or a fabric, which is holding all the events together. And all of a sudden now you have a hole. So the whole fabric of time suffers because it reduces its capacity to hold events on it. So this is what time islands are. And so they're areas, so Atlantis is part of a time island. That's why we cannot find, it's like a mythical story for us. It happened about 30,000 years to 15,000 years ago, the destruction. And there was a big cataclysmic, the story is that it was a meteor that came that created 10,000 foot tsunami, 10,000 foot, waves, tsunamis, and destroyed the planet. And it's very hard for us today to find any evidence of Atlantis because it's on a time island. And so it's very hard for us to find, besides a few stories, but to find actual artifacts or something concrete, because it's been left on this time island and we can't reach it so easily. And then what happens is on both sides of this time island, the fabric of time becomes weaker and weaker. So it's not a good thing for us to have time islands. So in the notes that I gave you, yeah, they're created 30,000 years ago. On either side, the area gets bigger on the fabric of time. It's harder for that island to stay on the fabric of time, so it can all be lost, which would be a shame because all of that complexity then doesn't get added to what's going on. We lose that that information that we've been able to accumulate. And this weakens the complexity that we're trying to create, and it also makes it prey to this enemy, this nothingness, because now it's exposed and it's easier to get at it. There are some natural breaks that can happen. They're called time quakes, and there are technologies that can be used to create these time quakes. So I want to bring this to your attention because in the story of Falco coming back at this moment in time to create another timeline, he comes from 600 years ahead of us where the timeline stopped. So either we were destroyed or we lost the level of complexity. We probably lost the soul, if you want. Maybe we were, back to cavemen, but it stopped. So the story is that we are right now living on a 600-year timeline, like time island. We're also on a time island right now. So we need to take good care. We are yes, Lena, tell us what you are thinking when I said this.
So we are in a very interesting time these last 2 months.
Yeah, we are.
What is this? Is this a loop? Is this an island? Island?
It's a very good question. I don't know if you guys have listened to some of the Dam and Her topics. I'm going to go a little bit off topic, but I will share this with you because part of my story with Dam and Her. So when I went to Dam and Her the first time, it was when Falco was dying. I didn't know. I was just there. And usually Thursday night, there was always a gathering of all the people. And so it was I had just arrived there maybe 1 or 2 days, but I went to the Serata and everything they were saying. I'm just going to close my door, guys. Hold on. Is this interesting? No, it's a good story.
Yeah.
It's a good story. So I arrived and they were waiting for Falco. I had no idea who he was. I had no idea what state he was in. I had no idea he was dying. And he didn't come on the stage because he passed away on the Sunday. He was dying, but he came on the phone. And he spoke Italian. I'm Italian, so I understood. And they asked him some very strange questions. And one of the questions they asked him is, what level is the Grail at? So I understood nothing of anything that was happening that night. I just took notes, what level is the Grail at? And he goes, it's the 6th level. And so I was like, okay, I know the Grail. I can write 6th level. And then what is the manifestation of the Grail? And he said, malattia, disease. So I wrote it down, and since then I have asked, this was 6-7 years ago. And so there is a belief, so the Grail has been something that esoteric schools or traditions have sought, because the Grail is considered a very powerful energy because it's a force that travels all the universes. And it's just touched by every part of the universe. It probably, like me and you are in a 3D world, probably lives in 100, dimensional world. So it's just this incredible source of intelligence and information and energy. And everybody throughout the ages has wanted to get and work with this energy because it's an incredible source of energy. And usually it's been a chalice. I don't know, Indiana Jones, all the kinds of different ideas of the Grail. So if you think about it, for the Grail right now to be not left for the elitist initiate schools that search for the grail, but to be in a form that touches everybody. Coronavirus is fantastic because all of a sudden we're like, this force is touching all of us, whether directly or indirectly. It's mobilized the planet. It's mobilized the planet. So I think at the beginning, the Damanurians, when I was talking to them, they were like, yes, it's happening, it's happening. Now they're probably like, I'm not sure what's happening. But I want to give you, I'm going to be totally honest. I think there is this, I mean, so the discussions that I've had with them is, so we, you know, this grail is now something that all of us can experience through this disease process. And maybe some of us, I mean, I know that I got onto my spiritual path because I got sick. You know, it's like, you know, before that I was in finance, I was happy, like everything was great. I didn't need any of this stuff 10, 15 years ago. But then I got brought to my knees and it's like, okay, so it definitely called me. And I don't, probably many of you have similar stories. Some of you are there from the beginning, but some of you might have come. I want to invite you to share maybe something. What do you think of this idea I shared with you? Don't take it all like, you know, you have to, what do you think? Duncan, yeah, Cindy, go ahead.
Can I just ask what was the level? Was the first one? What was the second? What was that second question?
I know he didn't mention the levels, what they were, but I think as if maybe you guys can help me with this.
What was the second question? You said they asked what level is the grail at? And then,
what level is the grail at? So it's the 6th level. My understanding is that means this is the 6th time that it comes through.
right. And what was the second question?
And what is its form? What is the form of the grail? And the form of the grail is disease, malatia. So you can imagine me sitting there going, okay, I knew they were from outer space, these guys. They're definitely from outer space.
Did he leave any kind of letter about this corona thing?
No,
No.
I haven't heard about this, Eva, but I can tell you that in the first few weeks, I was in touch because I was supposed to be there with a meditation group. I was in touch with all of them, and yes, they were freaking out, but most of them were so excited that, oh my gosh, this is like the grail, it's here, like big time, like, oh my God, who else can mobilize the planet? Like, this is awesome. So anyways, they were pretty like enthusiastic. Now I'm not so sure. But initially it was like, wow, okay, this is what that meant. So it's a, yes, Chacha.
Why are they not sure now? I don't understand that.
No, I think because economically now it's almost 6 months, you know, they are living on tourism and courses and
I see. Okay.
so
Yeah,
financially, and there is also this dark wave that is coming up, which some of you are part of my exchange of emails where we're thinking, oh my goodness, vaccines, tattoo chips, control of satellites, like it's almost like there's always this polarity, you know, and the more the light, the more the dark. So, you know, the battles are not, it's interesting. It's interesting. No, they are optimistic for the most part that this is an opportunity for transformation because it is part of the things they study and they work with. But economically, it becomes difficult too when, you know, if they don't bring income, they're not, you know, they're also, you know.
yeah, it's shaking up a lot of the world that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all these, and there are forces that are, I mean, I think, and I think that's why having these discussions are important. I'm very optimistic. I'm in awe at the information that has come my way in the last 6 weeks. and some of it is really ugly. Some of it is really, really ugly. And so it's like, wow, like the forces are all present, and what are we going to choose, you know? So we are, we still have to be, I think, warriors of our beliefs and warriors of our desires for moving this in a more harmonious way, you know? That's why we gather. That's why we do this. Good medicine for the collective. Yes, Sarah.
Um, I know I'm new to the party, and I'm just starting here. I'm wondering if, so what I'm hearing is talking about working with timelines. Does that mean altering timelines? And if so, can you speak into the ethics of that? Or, you know, I'm curious about that. Is it an ethical consideration? Is it not? Is it something we're supposed to go in and work with, or are we not? That's a question that's on my mind.
Okay, well then, ethic for what purpose? I think when you start to play on timelines like they are doing, you have to have a much bigger perspective. It's not the ethic of abortion or not abortion, or marriage or no marriage. It's an ethic that goes beyond maybe our terrestrial experience and more of a global. If you think that what happens on this planet also affects the evolution possibly of other galaxies, then who determines, you know, what? My understanding is that what they tried to do, because he came from this timeline that ended, what he came to do was to create a possible new future. So that in 600 years, we don't do that. We will see, we will see when we get into the more technical aspect of the magic of time, that to make an impact on a time, let's say you want we don't want to end up where he came from. To make that change might be to move one car instead of on the east side, on the west side, but you do it 200 years before, and the impact is carried through. And that information is what this book is trying to decipher, how things are all connected. There's a weight, there's a complexity. You don't have to go and do a battle. You can just move this pen from here to there and boom. Because in the short time that moving of pen is here, but in 100 years, it's that further. Yeah.
Butterfly effect.
Yes. So I think the ethic is in, and I view that I definitely wouldn't know what I would want to change. I could tell you that I don't want to get the vaccine, but that's 2 years
I'm
out.
with you on that.
You know, but what do we have to do today not to get there? Hey, maybe we have to have more of these discussions so we don't get there. So I'm in for that.
Okay.
But it's not ethical in that time. My understanding. Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Well, just if ethics even applies, I guess.
Yeah, listen, it does, but you have to believe that if these are beings that have a certain level of evolution, if they have technology of a certain capacity, they're going to have evolution that matches that technology, because in the wrong hands, it's destruction. So you have to believe that they have a bigger perspective than maybe we are here. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank
you.
you.
That's the best. Listen, I'm just giving, guys, this is not written anywhere. This is my experience with the little bit that I learned, okay? And you can take it and make it your own, and then, you know, beg, borrow, and steal other people's ideas. This is just one perspective, you know, mine. Mixed up with what I know. Mixed up with what I know. And Duncan, did you want to say something? Elizabeth?
Thank you.
No. You're good? Okay. So that would, there was something I wanted to read about the time island. Hold on. Let me see. No, it was on the weight. Hold on. Okay, so we have an idea of these time islands. We're on one. And then this is more of it's another one of the elements that is part of the geography of time. We've got the loops, the vortices and whirlpools, slow and fast. And slow and fast river moving or time moving is, it's important to talk about it. When you are close to power points, what Damenher uses a lot of is synchronic lines, these energy rivers that connect our planet to other planets. They're highways on which information travels. When you have, you are close to these synchronic lines or to power points that people call power points of the planet, you have more energy in that area, and so the events of the river of time flows faster. So there's more opportunity for evolution when there is this increased flow of time. Not that time goes faster, just that the density of information in that area of time is denser. So more things can happen, more events can happen to you, more difficulties like great aha moments. So these are the areas, and Damenher is considered very potent because of its location close to these synchronic lines. It was built purposefully in one of the most potent synchronic line area because the operations they do there, they want to have direct access to the consciousness of the cosmos. So in those areas, the potential of evolution and events happening, complexity is greater. So that's why faster flows of time potential. And in areas where it's less, they are further away, or there is a place I go to study in Greece, and I can tell you, you go back to that place in 20 years, it will be the same. They're little pieces of paradise that just don't change. So I think, you know, they probably are also evolving, but it's a different kind of, and in Damenher, it's always dynamic. So those are important to discuss. And then, so there's the time loops that we talked about where they create the possibility for time travelers. That's where they make the castles. Then there's the whirlpools where you have events sort of repeating themselves. Then you have these fast and slow flows of the river. You have also stops and these time islands that we just talked about. And then this other element is called the time weight. And I want to just read a little bit about it. It can be technical, but it's a little bit of a technical term. Think of so we have the river or the fabric of time, and we put information on it so that the fabric gets woven by these events. And we can't put something way too heavy, like we're going to break it. So the time weight makes sure that this stays pliable and a nice, you know, fabric, so it can maintain all this information that's happening in past, present, and future. Okay. But this talks also a little bit, Sarah, to what we touched on, is that when we want to have an impact on an event in the future, let's say, we might go and do a time travel in the past to change. Like I said, you move the pen 5 inches over and you have a completely different event happen today. This is that element that makes that happen, because it makes sure that the fabric of time always stays at the same kind of tension, and it won't allow it to drop. So you know, by moving if taking something out here, okay, you lift it up a little bit, where you better, you know, go and put something here so you can bring it up. So it allows this idea of time weight says, okay, you can move events in the time packets, but on the fabric of that time, you better make sure you've got the same mass and energy so that the events can all sustain themselves. But you can play around and remove elements from time packets to time packets. That's all really that I wanted to give you as a visual. So it just says, so in fact, research done in this field has revealed that an action in time produces a response at various points within different time packets, both in front as well as behind the point of action. While analyzing the events behind the point of action, while analyzing the events involved in this modification, a new type of relationship was discovered. The correspondence of these points is due to the presence of events with the same weight. So if you want to change something in the future, let's say, I don't want this cup here. Well, you better take something out somewhere down the road that has the same weight as this, or move it so that this can disappear. Should I say that again? Did you guys get that, or did I lose you? No. You got it, Duncan?
Yep.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay. I'm just trying to simplify these things. That's all I'm trying to do. Okay. So now I think you guys have now a totally different appreciation for time. This like front time as my cat meows, because like, hi, Sarah, hi.
May I ask a quick question?
Yes.
When you're talking about places like Damanhur that are built where there's a lot of energy and that there's a greater density of time there, I'm just wondering what it feels like.
Well, we have a few people here that have had this experience that can share for you this exact question.
Okay.
It's hard to describe.
Yeah, it's different for everybody.
Have you been to Arizona, Phoenix?
Or Sedona.
Sedona, sorry.
Yes.
You go to Sedona, you know how it feels. Well, this is, I think it's amplified. Because when you stand in Phoenix, you stand at the top of that mountain and then you just take it all in. When you go to the temples, you take it all in. And then when you get out of the temples, it's still there because the people are amazing. And it feels so different. We went to Torino and it just felt so dense. But when we went back to Damanhur, it was light, like it's so different. And you come here and it just sucks you into the earth. And I think for us, the worst thing is that we can't talk to anybody about this except for you ladies. And it's so hard because people just look at us like, where were you and why? And you feel what? What's wrong with you? Are you high or something? Even our kids, it's like, okay, yeah, sure. But you know what, if you can, you have to, and I don't know how it's in the States, but maybe Cindy can talk to Damanhur in the States, in Colorado. But in Italy, pizza every day, yes, that's okay.
Everything tastes better. Like it's just infused, everything tastes better.
Yeah.
But there's just a general, there's you know, you don't, everybody, well, not everybody, I mean, we're all human, you have good days and bad days, but a bad day there is not like anywhere else because everybody's looking out for everybody else. They just naturally do it. And there's no fear, there's no talk of fear and division. Like, you don't have to go very far around here before you get any of that. You get none of that. And I said, like I think I mentioned before, I was really interested in how they govern things and how they plan things and their constitution and everything. And it's always changing, which is about as organic a thing that you can imagine. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
I was in tears 4 or 5 times. I just couldn't believe a place existed like that.
Oh.
So, but
And I'm
to do
sure
that here, it's a tall order, but you know,
How many
it's
people are
that
there?
did it, so.
Wow.
Yes, Cindy, what did you want to say? Thank you, Duncan.
Just say it's the best thing and the worst thing that happened to me, because it's really hard to live a normal life now. It's like the same as Elizabeth and Duncan. I'm just floating out here in upstate New York. And every time I see a WhatsApp from Alessandra or Duncan or Elizabeth, it's like, oh my God, my family. So yeah, it's constantly with me now.
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
so. Did you, Cindy? Would you say that Colorado had any of that environment atmosphere as in Italy, or?
It didn't feel the same. It didn't feel the same to me. You know,
And they
remember,
don't have the synchronic line, do they? They don't
No.
have the synchronic lines. No, they have to.
we would be thinking about I remember talking to Duncan about something outside of our rooms, and I go, that never happens. It was something, I forget what we were saying, and then I dreamt about it. Like I said to him, I don't dream. Yeah. And then the synchronicities were like boom, boom, boom. Like we would just be thinking downstairs having cappuccino, and then the person would show up. The synchronicities were amazing.
Yeah, it's, everything is a little bit more heightened. Yeah, it's incredible experience to have, because like you shared, it marks you, you know, it leaves an imprint. Yeah. There we go. There, that's. And Eva, do you want to add something?
Well, I had fun.
We know you.
Doing your walnuts, yeah.
Oh my God, the walnut story. Okay, now we are going to enter the kingdom. This is the modern research that they did on the kingdom of time. And let me see, I think I wanted to read something to you guys. Let me see. Yeah. Okay, hold time allow the formation of the new theory structure of time. Thanks to this, today we can speak of kingdom of time. Yeah, I think are you guys okay when I read stuff? Is it, it's not okay? Because I think I can go through my notes, but I think it's nice to read it just to get a little bit deeper into it, and then we can just jump into it. What I'm realizing, what I'm really want to share with you is they're giving us how they arrived at the information they arrived at. And it was great information because they discovered time creatures. So like we have seeds of different plants that we can grow in our garden, there are these time creatures that they can germinate into different places in time that can be useful to change what's happening in that time. So all of a sudden it opened them up to, oh my gosh, we've got allies in this territory that we can work with, like, you know, these beings. So it's a little bit of how, like, you think, you listen to this, how did they get there? It's a process of exploration. They observed certain things by using their different technologies and arriving at different conclusions. So I'll just read it a little because I think it's fun. It's a different way of thinking, and you get an idea of how they come up with these ideas. They don't just sit there and kumbaya and it downloads. No, they sit there and they do whatever technique they know to go and explore these areas. So part 2, the kingdom of time. In 1998, research in the field of magic revealed a new and crucial discovery that revolutionized previously held ideas about time and allowed for the formulation of a new theory of the structure of time, one that views it as a living structure. Thanks to this advance, today we can speak of a kingdom of time, one that takes its place among the three traditional known kingdoms, the animal, the vegetable, and the mineral kingdom. At this point, we can provide the reader with a short history of the discoveries that have been made in this field in recent years. So in 1997, thanks to advanced selfic technologies, instruments were made that allowed time to be studied in enlarged details, similar to using a microscope to analyze a fragment of matter. Only in this case, the object to be analyzed is the fabric of time itself. We are now referring to the weave of events which have already been explained in the first part of this chapter due to the time-space fabric on which these weaves sit. So all these events sit on a fabric. We create the fabric of time. All these the saturated events create the fabric. And now with this technology, they're observing it and seeing and understanding what is happening to the fabric. Using this new research tool, the morphology of time's fabric emerges as variable and irregular, just to make things more complicated, revealing a series of previously unknown elements that quite clearly interacted with the saturation of events. The series of advances in research that have allowed for the new formulation of the time kingdom theory are very complex and concern functions of time that are not easily accessible to those who are not involved directly with the work in this field. Nonetheless, we can attempt to synthesize the discoveries made by summarizing some of the relevant concepts. So that's where they talk about, hold on, at first they saw that when events were created, that they wouldn't, you have these fall of neutral events, which is the law that says fall of neutral events. The ones that touch material things become saturated. That means that they imprint the fabric of time because they actually play at creating events in time. The non-saturated stay at the bottom and they can get used by, in those time capsule, those loops that happen in time. But when they were looking at that, they saw, hey, it's not even. It seems like some of these events get saturated, but on the way of being saturated, they disperse somehow weirdly. So they thought, oh, maybe there's clouds or there's temperatures, and they realized there's none of that, but there's these time creatures that play with these events. So basically, I wanted to set that up because they thought at first they were, oh, maybe it's like a cloud or something, and it doesn't change the saturation of the event, but it modifies where it falls a little bit. So what's happening? So I'm just giving you this idea to give you an idea that it's so alive and it's so complex in its expression, what we are living, okay? So that was just to say they thought it was clouds, it was different things, but then they realized, no, it's not creatures. Oh my gosh, these are cute. We can play with them. And so they did. And so they realized that they call these time creatures. And they can have an impact on this fall of events that happened, which are the potential to create the fabric of time. So it's important because if you can work and you can communicate to the time creatures and you want to have an impact, a positive impact on time, you can get them to germinate and do things in different areas of time where you can create more complexity, to maybe move through a time packet. Like, I'm just giving you things to play with, but you can see how rich it becomes. It's like, once you have all the elements, you can start making, okay, so these are creatures that can be used to help us in our evolution and help us in creating more complexity in the elements that of the time packets, and they can be allies for us. So that was the big discovery. Yes, Lena.
Do you have an example of a time creature?
Yeah, yes, they do talk about them. The way that they talk about them is, okay, let's see if I can find you here. Hold on. For creating the zone of having a high time temperature. Okay. See later that this zone has many points of contact for many links.
So that's not like a fairy, is it?
It can be. Yes, absolutely. And okay, so the way that they first, so Lena, the way that they first, before they thought of time creatures, they thought of time temperatures. Okay, it looks like something happens, and it must be maybe a different level, a different temperature there. But it wasn't a temperature, it was these creatures. So let me see when it talks about this, are determined by the interact with events, but that are not forms and not made of matter. Proceed with this finding, or we can define a primary matter. Okay. So took place when was the first category turned. Okay. So I think for me to answer that, we might have to read some of these pages. If you guys are okay with that. Yeah, we have time. We have time.
Alexandra,
Yes.
we just read it this afternoon and there isn't anything.
There's no
Like
there are
an
no
example of
examples.
a time creature.
No, but it doesn't, but it does. If you read the time temperature, because this they arrived at it, they thought they were dealing with temperature. Hold on, let me put the light on here. Well, you know what? Let's read this together. It's just 2 pages, but I think it will give you, Lena, a continuation. So it's on page 92, time temperature. So the first new concept to add is that of time temperature, which is the name given to a variable in sum of times functions. To understand this concept, imagine you are monitoring the fall of events in a specific geographical space, and that we can then determine how many events are available for each instant in that area, because this is what you need to do time travel. Did you guys understand what's happening here? They are monitoring the fall of neutral events, and they are seeing how it's impacted the fabric of time. They've got a kind of microscope. They can see the fall of neutral events. Okay. And when we have completed this task, we analyze this area with the new tools and discovered that although we get a precise quantity of events for each instance, there are some anomalies. Some events are being subjected to a sort of deviation in their angle of penetration into form, as if there was something already using these events before they become available at the level of form. Okay, so hold that. However, after this deviation, the event still becomes available as if nothing has happened. But this anomaly creates a shadow in the fall of rain of events. This anomaly is a testimony to the existence of something that does not belong to the world of form, but is somehow able to interact with the event while keeping their potential from expression at the level of form unchanged. So they realize that, hey, we can watch the fall of the event. We see that it impacts, but we can also tell that something's happening to it. These time creatures bring those events to parallel universe, use them, and then bring them back. Okay, just to give you how complex it is. So this is just their observation. They think they're dealing with some kind of temperature variation. So if we imagine the fall of events as rays of lights, we can see in the figure how area of shadows and light are created. So they give this picture. They say, oh, okay, so maybe this is what's happening. The events are coming down, but there's a little shadow, and maybe that's what's having an impact on the fabric of time. No, they had to give this idea up. But this doesn't give an example, but it gives you the thought process to arrive at the creatures. Are you guys okay to read this a little bit? You guys okay? Yeah. If we imagine the fall of events as rays of lights, we can see in the figures how areas of shadow and light are created. The function of time changes in response to these two different conditions. At this point, we say that the two areas in question are subject to different time temperatures. Let us pursue this by analyzing the weave of time in the same way. A determined geographical space is divided into squares of around 5 kilometers. The temperature of time is measured in each, and it is observable that there are different readings depending on the square, some high and some low. So for convention, we define a zone as having a high temperature, where there are many anomalies in the difference of the fall of events. This means that there are many elements still unidentified that interact with the events and change their angles of impact within form. And we will see later that this signifies that the zone has many points of contact. This one is not as important, but you can see that they're trying to figure out what is happening. It's not changing the fabric of time, but it's modifying how it's coming in. And so they need to understand it if they're going to go play on the plane of time. You know, if they're going to alter events, they better know all the elements that they've got to play. So let's go to page 94. These different values in temperatures are determined by mysterious objects that interact with the events, but that are not forms and are not made of matter. So this is where they start. But wait, let me just... Oh, okay. Let me, guys, I should read this. So at the end of page 93, I want to read this last paragraph. So we talked about, they're observing that there's a change in some area of time. Is this interesting? Is it okay? Yeah, I'm just building up the information so we can have a solid understanding. So they figured out that, okay, we can measure that something is happening. We can see some of these are coming in at different angles. It's not impacting, but it's having an impact. What is it that's creating this things to be different? So we will see later that this signifies that the zone has many points of contact, therefore many links with parallel realities, other dimensions, or other time branches, when instead there are very few of these possible links to other realities. We define a zone as having a low time temperature. So what they decided is, okay, when we have a lot of these anomalies in the fabric of time, we'll say it's got a high temperature. When we have the same kind of space, but it has not so many changes on the fabric of time, we'll say that it's got a low temperature. They didn't know what to call this at the beginning. They were just saying, there's something happening, we just don't know. But what they are clearly talking about is it's definitely that these events, when they're coming through this, might be going on parallel timelines, having do their job here, and then we get a chance to use them here as well. So that was clear to them, that these fall of events were saturated in other parts of the timelines, in other timelines. And then on page 94, these different values in temperature are determined by mysterious objects that interact with the events, but are not forms and are not made of matter. So this is where the next information is the same charges have been found in. So this is just a little bit further down in page 94. So accordingly to this theory, the mysterious object responsible for the deviation in the angle of incident of the fall of neutral events are actually living structures that do not belong to the world of form, but are made of time itself. Thus, the idea of time creature was born. Beings that have their own realm of existence and their own vital rhythms. Their presence at the borders of the world of form determines the phenomenon of time temperature, while their development, their metabolism, determines the variation in the time temperature. Following analysis were, okay, so that gives you, so then at the bottom of, am I going too fast? You guys okay? No. At the bottom of page 95, at this point, research turned their efforts towards the surmounting of this hurdle, and after a few months of work, they found the right frequency out of millions of possibility that is needed in order to photograph the time creatures with the available instruments. So page 95, so they measured these little guys or took pictures. After this discovery, the concept of time temperature became a secondary importance, and the spotlight shifted to direct analysis of the time creatures, which were collectively baptized time vegetations, because their virtual rhythms are reminiscent of those belonging to our own plant world. It was during this phase that the most important element in the field were discovered, giving rise to numerous practical application and strengthening and desires of our research to continue moving in this direction. And let me just continue, because I think this is important. What do you think, guys? Should I continue? Yes? Or am I putting you guys to sleep? No, no. Time vegetation was predicted to be a new dimension which played host to a great number of new living species with different characteristics. These species are distinguished based on their extension in time and the type of interaction they can have with the dimension of form. Despite their extensive diversity, such species have three fundamental characteristics in common. Their development does not follow one defined time direction, but can extend in many directions. From our point of view, this means that they can move both forward towards the future as well as the past, and even in other direction, which equates to exiting our dimension. They are also able to adapt themselves to different laws. In fact, it is actually thought, this principle, that they are able to move through time from one dimension to another, although from a certain point of view, we could also say that they create the fabric of time themselves by their extensions. This means that they are an extremely valuable channel for contact with other realities and dimension, as in the case of anomalous objects, which I think is used for time travel. They use these kinds of objects. And their presence in our dimension, though, as we have said, they actually manifest at the border of ours and other dimension, translates into a particular interaction with living forms. They come through us in dreams, memories, and emotions, and how these creatures interact with us. The most important aspect of this is how these creatures have the ability to modify our memories. And there is a course that we can do in Damanhur. I did it not with you guys, I did it last time, where we got implanted a time seed, and we were able to go back in time in our own life and change an event with the help of a time seed. So that was pretty fun. That was pretty fun. And it lasts about 6 months when you do this kind of course. The end of the chapter, the end of page 97, from this point on, our research took just this path, analyzing a multitude of different creatures, trying to catalog them, and attempting to synthesize elements that could initiate defined time branches in the laboratory, which is how time seeds, the proverbial seed of time were eventually produced. And this is one of the research they do, and you can do a course on with the time seeds to change past and previous events. So that is this beautiful introduction to time. Dun, 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 dun. So if you thought you had an understanding, I hope now you have a totally different one. What do you guys think? Did I lose you? Any thoughts? Anything we want to discuss before we close? So, Lina.
Well, this is very much like the pattern of time is what we're talking about. And I've noticed lately on television or in Netflix and some of these, Amazon Prime, there's shows about time travel.
Yes, okay.
And so it would be interesting to take some of these concepts and put a story around them to be able to better grasp it. It's like here we're doing theory.
Yes, and we are going to do that. We are going to get to that. There is, we have a few more chapters. The next chapters are easier to read because they're more story-like. And then the one that gets guys, read as much as you want. The ones that the magic technology chapter is when we're going to touch on all this, and that's a big chapter. I think the next time we'll probably get to the ancient human history and the structure of the human soul. We might be able even to do inner senses because it's going to go faster, these concepts, because they're not as dense with all these pieces of information. Like we needed to become aware of this different vocabulary of time. We have like 30 more terms to time that we had when we started. So we had to get a little bit of an ear for them. And now that we have a little bit of an ear for them, when we get further along and we start playing with this concept of time travel, they'll be easier to understand. But it gives you an idea that these esoteric traditions, that the real esoteric traditions are dense of knowledge and information. Like you can imagine, the true magicians, the kind of studying and understanding they had to do to perceive the multidimensional aspects of our world and be able to understand how they work. So it's not just sitting in that can happen too, but this is very hands-on, practical. So,
where Lena was talking about shows on Netflix and so on, we've just been through a whole bunch of them, some years ago, and some Timeless was one we just recently saw. And it's strange how these shows get, Travelers is another one, that was a Canadian one, really good. It's strange how they get canceled after 2 years.
oh, they do.
Because, it gets really complicated after that. Because they're all basically the same, and there's a Spanish one called El Ministerio del Tiempo, which is almost the same premise as Timeless, but in Spain. So if you understand the history of Spain, you'll enjoy it a lot more. And we didn't know much about Spanish history, but these three people go back in time and try and change things so that the future is to keep the timelines going, because someone else went back there and buggered it up, so they have to fix it. Anyway, but it's funny that they never seem to get past 2 seasons, because I was reading about the history of this Timeless show, and it got canceled after the first season. Like, why? It's brilliant. It's really well written. They all seem to have, the dark side is like a cabal kind of organization, that's just infiltrated everywhere. They have sleeper guys at different times and all this stuff. It's really well written. And then for some reason it just goes poof. It's strange because it's like they're uncharted territory, or they figure people won't be able to to understand if they take it to the next level. I don't know, because you could see how complex this whole thing is. You know, you could just simple things like we can understand, you know, but it's funny that it doesn't go further. Or it's
That to me is always, when something gets taken down like that, that to me is always this indication that there's something real that they've touched. And so they don't want it revealed too much. I know that, because this is just stories I heard. When did the E.T. movie come out with Spielberg? Was it
79?
It was a lot. It
No,
was
a little, no older than that, because my
Oh, so it
son
was
was
75
about
maybe.
85 or something, yeah.
Before Star Wars, yeah.
Yeah.
So how long ago? 30 years ago?
75, 40,
Wow. Okay.
No, no, it was at least 85, 85,
85.
84.
No, E.T.
No,
was.
I was
Oh,
around
okay.
70 because I went to it with a boyfriend that I used to have, and it was around 70 because I
It
broke
was
up
at
in 71.
So 50 years ago. No, it wasn't 50 years ago.
Yeah,
It says 1982.
82.
There we go. Yeah, because my boy was really little, I remember, because somebody took him and he wanted to change the channel at the movie theater. He'd seen enough of it.
Oh,
And
he didn't like.
yeah, he was
Okay.
really little, so yeah.
So we're talking, because my understanding is that when Spielberg did the E.T. movie, Dam and Her was already started. So that's why I think it's 40 years, 40, 45 years now it's been around. They invited him because they were doing time travel. Sorry, what did you show me, Cindy?
82.
82, thank you. Okay, 28, so 48 years ago. Wow. So they had invited, so maybe before Damanor was fully established. Anyways, they had invited him to come. I thought it was around the movie, maybe it was after. And they invited him to come because they were talking about their time travel machine in the Hall of Waters. We did go in the Suffolk cabin where we saw the big machine with all the Suffolka.
No, we didn't.
We didn't go in the cabin.
No.
So in
Was it the cabin downstairs near the
yes, it was downstairs in
cabin?
It was
Yeah,
downstairs.
we went in there.
Okay, so
Coffee shop?
yes, below the coffee shop.
Oh, yeah, we did.
We did. So all of that Suffolka was in the temple, in the Hall of Water, and they did time travel from there. They used the Suffolka and other things to time travel, and they were very forward with it. They were talking about it, and then they had to shut it down because they were getting they were just getting too much attention. So they were excited to share that with the world, and I think they invited Spielberg, and then they decided it was too dangerous to talk about it. But they were doing.
I would not talk to him about it either. I think that's they're touching on something that's they don't want us to know about that.
No,
you know.
no. And I guess at first, they thought anything that can raise consciousness or bring our evolution and speed it up seems like a good idea sometimes, but they realized it was not the right time, so they backtracked. But the temple is used for time travel. Yeah, it's one of the reasons it was also created to allow this kind of operations. Not big things, like I said, moving a stone or, moving something. Yeah, very interesting, coming in someone's dreams or things like that, to get an emperor to build something he hadn't thought of before. So just little things to have an impact. But they need, like you see, they can't, like you need to know what you're doing or you can mess up big time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought it was maybe So Falco died of an illness, like a physical.
He
What had he
died
died?
of, yeah, he
He
died
died
of pancreatic cancer, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, pancreatic cancer. Within, I think 3-4 months he died.
Yeah, it goes really quickly if you get that.
It
Yeah.
was very quick. And he
I
announced
thought
it,
liver. I thought it was liver.
liver or pancreas, one of the two. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. But, you know, it was interesting to be there when he mentioned, you know, what is the Grail and its disease, and you know, like he takes a big hit. Yes, Cindy, go ahead.
I asked, who is our driver?
Oh my
Giro.
gosh. Yeah,
Giro.
Gira.
I asked Giro, I said, did Falco really die or did he go time traveling? And Giro just looked at me and he didn't say anything.
He's time traveling. I'm
I
sure
think he's time traveling.
he's time traveling. That's one way to do it, reincarnate in different parts.
Well, we could be time traveling ourselves. I mean,
Yes, I think we're probably, I think some of us are definite. I have to believe when yeah, we probably are all time travelers. So nice to see you guys again in this dimension, in this moment.
intersect on Zoom.
On Zoom. Oh my gosh. No.
In 2020 on this 5th of May.
Yeah, 5/5/2020. Yeah, very interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, that was that's good for tonight. I think that we can leave it there. I think the next chapters will go much faster because the concepts are a little bit more, they're not so technical, they're more storytelling like. And then when we get to the technologies, that will be a woo. But we can look at 2 weeks out and see what date works for everybody. Let me see. And who knows, life might be back to normal in 2 weeks if we are really optimistic.
You want to go back to the same thing?
No, you know what I want to see? I'm going to be really honest with you. I want to see people more serene. Like, I think some people are having a really hard time emotionally, and I'm seeing it. People are angry. People are scared to look at you. Chacha was with me this weekend, and she was saying, I just want to go around and hug people. And Chacha, I have to share this with you. Your red little Vespa, she came over with her red little Vespa, raised so many eyebrows of my neighbors. They're like, Alessandra, what a cute little machine. I go, no, it's my friend.
Yeah, good. Yeah, they were like nice, all waving.
It's a happy machine. It's a happy little machine. Now we were saying that, you know, like Chacha wanted to go up and hug everybody. I go, be careful, they're gonna whack you up. So people are scared. People are really scared.
Do you find that people in Toronto say hi a lot more?
Hold on.
No,
Let me take this on.
no. And that's what I want to break that tension with.